Well, hi, Sean. I'm about to talk about something quite serious, but
Right.
some of the thoughts got into my head, which I've got to get out. So I want to talk about the Dippity Dip.
The dip.
Every time I hear about the dip, I just
The
think about people going Dippity Dip. Something you put your food in before you eat it. Yeah. Or indeed.
Dips. Yeah,
Dip dips. Yeah. But let's not burn valuable recording time messing around. So before I talk about the dip, which was announced on Monday, we're recording this on Thursday, 2nd of July. It's interesting how it's sort of taken on a different role now. I mean, it was the big thing, or one of the big things that led to the latest sort of round of Starmer out, wasn't it? When Healy resigned, followed by Action Man, Al Cairns.
Yeah.
Friend of the show.
I think the Tories ought to have one of those at their conference. Get an Alcan's Action Man sorted out where all the different parts. He could have a bill in his hand, and he could have
Why do the Tories want one? He's Labour.
Oh, he's Labour.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
think he should be a Tory.
I think exactly. It's funny you should say that. Because he looks so chiseled. He belongs on the blue side of the house.
And he'd go well. They could almost form the guy from the Isle of Wight and the other one who's always talking about. They could almost form a platoon, couldn't they? Do you know the two that? And there's David Davis as well. They could be the SAS, the military wing of Parliament.
Tallest on the right.
Shoulders on
the left and cigarette size. Anyway, our military training, if we can call it that, is coming up. But back to the serious matter.
We've done service.
Yeah,
in the boys.
In the boys, based on military. But the DIP, or Defence Investment Plan, as I should call it, obviously had all this kind of noise around it. But eventually it has come out. So I got a few headlines and then some political context around it. I won't go on too much because most people have heard it. But I guess the big picture is it's being billed as a 15 billion increase in defence spending over the next 4 years, although the military bods explain that more than half of this is down to what they call treasury trickery.
Right.
It's money. I think what they mean by that was money that was already in there. But it still brings the department up to about 300 billion over the period. And that sees it rise to 2.7% of GDP by 2030.
Yeah.
Longer term ambition, 3%. And why do these things matter? These GDP commitments are NATO level commitments, or in other words, Trump level commitments. So that was the first thing. So fairly big number. Underneath that, the largest ever investment in drones and autonomous warfare. So I think this is learning in particular from Ukraine and even recently from the Middle East. And is certainly Al Cairns in his resignation speech talked a lot about this. So we have to build for the wars of tomorrow, not for the wars of yesteryear. So I guess that's the thing. Major investment in next generation military equipment. So this is the fighter program, the Tempest fighter program.
Yeah, we heard about that.
Yeah. Nuclear submarines, new ones, because ours are getting on a bit.
I think what was interesting about the Tempest thing, wasn't it? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I
it's
think
good.
that's totally autonomous of the Americans, isn't it? It's between, I think it's Britain, Italy, and Japan, is it? Or did you get?
Well, you were ahead of me there.
Yeah.
But yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. There's no involvement of the Americans. They're not buying F-15s or any of this sort of American-inspired stuff anymore. They're moving more towards some European and independent production.
Quite pleased to have the Japanese components. The Italian ones, I'm not entirely sure. But that's another. Anyway, sorry, Italy. I'm only joking. So I mentioned nuclear submarines, and this very basic thing: expanded missile and ammunition supplies, which sounds like we've got loads, but apparently we're a little bit thin on the ground there, having obviously supplied Ukraine and also the Middle East conflict, although we got lambasted for not taking part. We've used a lot of ordnance out there. And the other thing, of course, won't surprise you, AI-enabled targeting systems, laser weapons and cyber, that sort of stuff. So that's the third thing. Fourth thing is a stronger focus on defence industry and jobs. So basically make it here, I think is the gist. And that makes sense if you're going to spend money. Although there's some argument around whether we've got the capacity and skill set, but I'm happy we're having the argument, so that's fine.
Well, funnily enough, that feeds in to a certain extent with what we'll talk about this later, but what Burnham said in his speech in Manchester on Monday, didn't he, about producing wherever possible, producing things in this country rather than buying abroad in terms of cost.
Absolutely. And don't obsess about, saving another 2% if it means you can't build it in the UK. And the last thing, sort of broad categories, on a lot of detail underneath all this, is reprioritizing, which is one way of putting it, government spending towards national security. So I think obviously Starmer does, and Burnham recognises that the credit card is maxed out, so new borrowing isn't going to cut it. So inevitably you end up looking at other budgets. And this is where the politics kicks in. So if we take those headlines, it all seems, as I say, it all seems a little bit, we've been waiting for this, and there's a big argument about it, but that argument hasn't really continued, although the military bods are saying it's not enough. But, well, we'll have to trust it for what it is. But the political thing is quite interesting, because some are saying, quite a few are saying, that this was Starmer's way of going, right, you want my job, have this, because apparently there was already a 4.7 billion funding gap in the first draft of
I think they call that in the a black hole.
Black hole. Okay. Happy with a black hole, 4.7, but there is now a bigger black hole because these slightly increased commitments, 7 billion. So round figures, about a 12 billion up bit. And Burnham's got to find this on top of, let's not forget some of the things, and we'll come on to it when you talk about his speech, some of the promises he's making elsewhere, and I won't go into them to sort of steal your thunder, but it's sounding like already Burnham's walking into a numbers game issue.
Yep.
And, is he going to have the balls to follow through cuts in departmental budgets? Because, I don't know, is there a point where you are cutting into the bone, not the fat, when you start to do these things?
It's interesting what you say there, because the mood has changed over the last week. Because when Starmer said he was going to present the dip this week, and when Burnham had just been elected, his people were putting out the story that they'd been consulted and they were signed up to this. They were in agreement with everything that Starmer was going to be putting forward. However, as it got closer and closer and closer to presentation, it started to leak out that no, he'd seen bits of it, but he hadn't agreed it all and what have you. So there's a backing away from committing to what Starmer's put out. Now, whether that means that he's not prepared to spend as much money as is in the existing commitment that Starmer's put forward, or whether it means he's going to come forward and say, I've got this marvellous new plan that will mean that there's going to be more money spent. It remains to be seen. I can't see how he can back away any further with the military already chomping at the bit in terms of not getting what they want. So what does that mean? I mean, where does that, what you any thoughts on that as to where you think he'll go?
I think there's been such a hoo-ha, and the reality is we are under threat, or it feels that way, whether we are or not. I don't see him challenging this version of the dip. I don't think he'll go on top of it over and above. I think he'll say, fair cop, we'll walk into this and we'll do this. And I think he'll probably just take a simple route and try and get a haircut across all budgets, although they reckon the most vulnerable are transport, which is never a good thing because that's so important for growth, and energy security and net zero, which is very interesting. And there is a feeling like Burnham's more in the Badenoch Farage camp than Starmer was, which will lead on to a subsequent discussion we're going to have later about who's going to be in the top seats. But so in a long way of saying, yes, I think he'll honour the dip, but I don't think he'll go any further.
Can I ask you one other question? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you in your prime, but there's another question that I'm interested in, and that is, and I've only briefly looked at it, in terms of what they're calling homeland security, so making sure that we've got enough protection, anti-missile protection, to ensure that all these drones that are coming from Russia and all these ballistic missiles, that we're going to be able to make an attempt to shoot them down, even if we don't get them all. And previously, we had these, I think we had 3 or 4 frigates,
destroyers,
and only 2 of them were at sea or service.
One was sent to Turkey, wasn't it?
One was HMS Dragon. Is that the one?
Yeah. That was the most famous ship in the Royal Navy, wasn't it? For about a month.
Big Dragon painted on its side, didn't
That
it?
was
Big
it?
sort
Oh,
of-
excellent.
did you know, big dragon's mouth. I guess it's something to do with Wales. We commissioned in Wales, I suppose. But
Yeah.
what's happening on that front? We're going to have a golden dome or something?
Well, the way I saw that is we're going to have this sort of autonomous vessel chugging around.
Just one. Just one.
Well, hopefully more than one. And I don't think Golden Dome came into it.
No.
And so it was a sort of a low budget replacement. That's the way I read it, for the destroyer fleet. But it does feel that we're hellishly exposed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And this is where I think you start to rely on NATO. There was a very optimistic chap on the radio the other day saying,
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say. Go on.
But a very optimistic chap. He was saying that, well, you've got to look at Russia aren't going to do this, they're not going to do that, because if Europe combine, forget about NATO. If Europe combine its assets, they dwarf. Russia's dwarfed, but yeah, that's all very well and good. But how do you get all those member states to agree to take up the battle? That's the thing.
That's the problem, isn't it? And I know I've heard it. I thought you were going to say, because I've heard the argument before, that if and as and when the Russians decide to fire ballistic missiles at it, they've got to cross Germany, they've got to cross the Netherlands, they've got all the weaponry to shoot them down. But nobody seems to take into account if they fire them from Vladivostok, and there's no countries between Vladivostok and Scotland, then we've got to shoot them down. So
there is. I can trump you on that with the small t. There is the Northern Fleet, who don't have to fire over anyone. They just pop one off. It's not funny. I mean, there's no question, if Putin wanted to, he could. But that's when war game theory comes into play, doesn't it? It's first strike, he wins because you're not ready for it. But then it's what happens next. But anyway, part of preparing it is the dip. That's what's on the table. But what's equally as fascinating of the components of the dip is going to be the political implications of how it's paid for. And I guess we're going to find out about that in October in the usual way.
Isn't your argument just that the department ought to take a haircut, isn't it?
Well, I'd say that will save Burnham a lot of angst, because if everyone has to, including health, if everyone has to take a cut, then he doesn't get involved in a backbench revolt or anything like that. And of course, there'll be the constituent from the MP from XYZ constituency. Does he realise, right, little gentleman, that I'm unable to build the school that we were going to build? And he's just going to have to say, I do, and I'm sorry, we're just going to have to live with that. And when you're a new PM, you've sort of got the right to do it. But, I don't want to steal your thunder on the speech, because he wants to do other things, obviously.
Well, I think if I were him, I'd get to Westminster and look at the defence, the dip, and say, this is a job for number 10 North, and pass it on.
Well, we'll talk about number 10 North.
The poor souls in Manchester.
Yeah, number 10 North. There you go.